Hello, everyone. We are good and live. Welcome to the final virtual book tour stop for the poetry book Not a Myth, out on Amazon. And to discuss the book, we have the authors Molly and Marcia. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Tired, but good. Happy to be here on your channel.
Thank you.
Great.
That's great. It's good. We're all good. So it's nice to be here. So I kind of wanted to start this kind of live stream off. How did this book come into concept? Because there's so many awesome great things about kind of the world building. So how did this book come into concept? Did you guys know each other before this? Did you meet because of the book?
Mm-hmm.
Where does the journey start with Not a Myth?
Yeah, so Mar and I have been following each other on Instagram for a few years, and Mar had supported some of my previous projects, and then in 2019 our favorite book got published called The Starless Sea. It became both of ours favorite book, and we posted about it all the time. So we just started keeping in touch because of that. And then when mine and Bridget's book club, the Bard Book Club, was we're going to do Shakespearean readings every month, Mar on Twitter was oh, I'd like to be in these. And then the first time we really hung out outside of that was when the Hamilton film came out last year. We had a bunch of people on Zoom to watch it. And then we have a Discord server, and Mar joined the server. And then we just realized that we had identical tastes in stories, and so we would just buddy read every book because we all wanted to read the same books. And Mar, I knew, was this very talented artist, and I went to school for poetry. So a few months ago, it was April, which is poetry month, I was like, hey, I know some poets like Rupi Kaur will release these books that are poetry with little doodles and stuff. I was like, what if we did full illustration, your drawings with my poems? And Mar was like, yes, let's go. And so we sat down the first night. We had a meeting over Zoom, and we made a list of vibes. We we were like, what do we want it to have? And we were like, the Starless Sea. And then, Mar, right, we just started to make a list of what kind of stories we wanted it to emulate.
Yeah, we wanted to a compendium of all these stories, and also this ambience of a magic forest and a fantasy land that the reader can get into and just travel by. And I don't know if I've been describing it as an experience that doesn't stop with Molly's poetry or my illustrations. You can go further than that with watching movies or going on a walk in the woods and listening to music, stuff like that, drinking a nice cup of tea. So yeah, we wanted to create our own world, but it was heavily inspired in these stories and music and all of that. And it's just a very immersive world for the reader to get lost in. So
yeah, we decided pretty early that we didn't poetry collections will tend to have a theme, but we were very much, I had said to her, I was like, well, Taylor Swift said that all the songs on folklore are happening in the same place that Taylor Swift refers to as the folklorian woods. And I was like, so we could make this, I said we could make our own forest, and the whole thing is happening there. And so that was the idea, and we tried to pick stories that we could then shift into our own versions of characters that would be taking place in the woods. And when we ordered the poems and pictures, we very much were like, this has to flow kind of like a story, and it's kind of we're taking the reader somewhere they're going into the story, which is why the first poem is just called Into the Woods. And yeah, we very much decided early on, we were it needs to be a concept piece, not just this collection of oh, this picture could go with this poem and vice versa. Very much we were this needs to feel like it's a story, even though it's being told not in prose.
Yeah, and going off of what you said, of trying to decide where everything goes, how did you decide on order of what poems go? And then did you do the illustrations getting Molly's poems, or did you draw beforehand, or were you guys doing it at the same time?
Yeah, it depended, because we had some artwork and some poems beforehand that we had in the store. For example, I had some drawings that I did for also a poetry class, and I was like, hey, what do you think of this? And Molly picked some of those. And yeah, like we will do it at the same time, or she will be like, hey, I have this poem, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I have an idea. Or we'll just like listen to a song or stuff like that, and like, oh, we can create a concept out of this, and we both did it at the same time.
Yeah.
It was, yeah.
There was like, I showed her like the David Bowie musical called Lazarus, and was like, I said I wanted something off they sing Heroes as the last song, but they really change how it sounds and everything, and based in the context of what goes on in that musical. And so Mark was like, okay, I'm already like seeing this, and we would be on Zoom figuring it out. But also like, there was a time we both read this book called House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, because I was reading it and I was like, Mara, you would like it. And she got it, and then just like for fun, she drew one of the characters, and I was like, I can make a poem to match that character, and we could put it in the book. And then the next day I was like, I actually started writing a poem for one of the other characters. And Mara was like, well, that's funny because I started drawing the other characters. And so then when we sat down to order it, we had like a discussion where I was like, I knew like we would have an intro poem and a closing poem, where I was like, we will start. Mara said early on, where do you want this to end? Like, what is the journey that the reader is supposed to go on? Where are we starting? Where are we ending? And I said, we're starting by going into the woods. We're ending in the center of the woods. Like, it's a journey. That's where you're going to. We're not going to like come back out of the woods at the end. And so we then just carefully were like, okay, we're including this story and this story. And so there was always poems we knew would be really close to the end. Like, we have a poem about Neil Gaiman that when we came up with that idea, we were like, that needs to be close to the end of the story. We had several characters from our web series Caravan of Lies that we had poems about. We were like, well, they seem like people you would meet really early in the forest. And so that was kind of how we tried to order it, was who would you meet in this forest first? Like, what does it make sense? Like, if this was a real place that a fictional character was going through, you know, like in Wonderland, like what order does Alice meet people? And it's kind of like, the further you go in the forest, the further you go in the book, the like more intense all the stories get. So that was the idea. And then like Mara said, like she already had some drawings that she'd done, and I had poems. We went through all of that first. Like, there's a really short poem near the end called Rabbit Holes Are Not Always Rabbit Holes. And I had written that in like 2015 and just had nothing to do with it because I couldn't submit a poem individually that was that short, but I knew like it needed to be that short. And so when we were making the list, I was like, I got a perfect poem for this idea. And I think the reason we already had some content we could use is, again, because this was just very much a style of storytelling we liked. The portal fantasy, enchanted forest, like going through a magical door to another world kind of situation. So it wasn't like a stretch for us to write and draw in this world. Like Mara said, it was like, it wasn't easy, but it never felt like work or like we had to rush it. We'd be in like Zoom calls for like 6 hours and not realize it had been like 6 hours because we've been like so into it. We would make like playlists that were incredibly specific. Like there's a character we based a poem on from the Lazarus musical called Thomas Newton. And most of that musical happens in his apartment. So we made a playlist called Thomas Newton's Apartment. Like that, we had a playlist like just for the book in general, and like that would help. And we'd look at pictures on Tumblr to like get ideas for things. And Mar would be like, "What do you think of like this color or this texture?" I'd be like, you know, I want to like feeling should we have for this poem. So it was just very much like a collaborative discussion but it didn't feel hard to collaborate. There never felt like a time where one of us was like, no, I don't want to do it that way. It was just naturally easy to collaborate.
And you guys are also talking about this because this was actually one of my questions, was that like, so you had various playlists, but like if you had to choose like only like maybe like 5 songs to like kind of describe the book and the feeling, like which ones would you choose?
I would pick, me personally, I would pick the Lazarus version of Heroes by David Bowie, because it's like the original is like a very upbeat song, and they kind of tone it down and strip it back in the musical. And it's kind of like more like, it's just a melancholy hopefulness based in the musical. So I'd say that. I would say Ivy from Taylor Swift's Evermore, very much so. There's a poem that's literally just after that song. I would say the song, the like opening song, Alice from the Alice in Wonderland Tim Burton movie, the like Alice.
Yes.
Like, oh, Alice, dear, where have you been? That song. what would be 2 more songs? My brain's like, pick something other than Taylor Swift. Oh, the Unwanted Animal by the Amazing Devil would be another one. There's just a lot of, it's like a very intense kind of romantic song, and there were several poems in this about like, you know, tragic romances. And then I would say just Underground from Labyrinth, the movie, the song David Bowie sings at the beginning and the end, Underground. Like the no one can blame you for walking away kind of thing. The idea of like no one would blame you from leaving your world and coming to this one kind of idea. Amar, what song would you say?
For me, I think I will say this song called Emmenez-moi by Cecile Corbel. She made some songs for The Secret World of Ariadne, so like just as a reference. I will pick from Labyrinth, As the World Goes Down, and maybe from Taylor, I Have a Hard Time Between the Lakes and Willow.
The Lakes.
Yes.
I was like gonna say Willow because that's like because just like the wait for the signal and I'll meet you after dark line, and then obviously the lakes, take me to the lakes where all the poets went to die. There's so many Taylor Swift songs on our playlist for it. We were like,
100%. I got the feeling. I was like, yeah, there's got to be a lot of good Taylor Swift songs on here.
We're huge Taylor Swift fans. So there was whenever we make a playlist for anything, we're always like, well, we could get some Taylor Swift on here. I don't think we've ever made a playlist for anything that doesn't have Taylor Swift songs on it.
That's literally me with every spot. I'm like, okay, well, which Taylor Swift song is going to be on here? Usually it's like repeated.
What else would you say, Mar? What are the other ones? How many you said As the World Falls Down, Willow, The Lakes. That the first song, I already forgot the name.
Strangeness and Charm by Florence and the Machine. I think that will work too. Yeah, just I don't know, very like music that just pulls you in, that it's very like inviting, you know? Yeah,
totally. I would love to listen to these playlists so much. Like the way that you guys were describing, I was like, oh my gosh, like I would love to listen to this.
We have a playlist like for the book. And then we had a playlist called Get Lost in the Woods. We have the Thomas Newton's apartment, and then we focus on a character from House Apollo called Gray, and her apartment's kind of a big setting, and Mar made one called Gray's Apartment. And and we'll just do that for books we're reading. Like we made a Starless Sea playlist, and we, for every Theater But Better live reading, I'll make a playlist for that reading. So like, and I'll share it on Twitter and be like, oh, to get excited. So like, Mar and I both have ADHD, so we like to hyperfixate on things. So when we had like recently watched again Alice in Wonderland, I was like, we need to make a playlist. And we sat there and we like made an Alice in Wonderland playlist just for one. We love a playlist. But yeah, we had 4 playlists for the books that we listen to all the time.
I love that. Like playlists are so much fun to make. Like
they really are. Yeah.
So like you guys have talked about this, and it's also in the like the acknowledgments that like you like kind of took like the media and the stuff that you love and kind of the vibes of it. Like Starless Eve mentioned, Neil Gaiman. If you want to like explain that a little more, and then like what elements of those stories like help you create the poetry book and the drawings.
So I wanted like this book to be a door for people to like pass through, and that's also why it's on the cover and all of that, and it shines because it's like something you open up and you walk through, and also to have this sensation like I always do in the forest. If I see an arch or something, I count to 3 and then I like pray there's something more and I cross. So like all the stories that we've like get inspiration from and all of that it's just that it's like finding a home or crossing a door and finding like something more, a place where you belong or whatever. It might be strange, it may not be for everyone, but you want to stay, you belong there, and you have a great adventure. And I think that's what we wanted to do, like have that feeling in this book. And it's like all about like people that love stories, that love like getting lost, and that are not like afraid of it or anything like that. It's just something they enjoy.
Yeah, we had a conversation one night where we were talking about how I said to her, I was like, I love, Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, but I never was like, oh, I want to go to Camp Half-Blood. I want to go to Hogwarts. I was like, I hate the outdoors, so no way would I want to go to camp. I was like, and I don't dream of school. and Hogwarts sounds stressful and corrupt. I was like, you know, as a kid, I was always like, my favorite book until The Starless Sea was published was Peter Pan. I've read it so many times. I read it for the first time when I was 10 years old. And I was like, this is just brilliant. And to this day, I think like that and Alice in Wonderland are like some of the most brilliant pieces of fiction. And then I had always wanted adult portal fantasy. And there were books I liked that had some elements of it, like Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. They still didn't fully feel like that idea of you find this world and it makes sense to be there until The Starless Sea came out. But the main character in The Starless Sea is a man. And in most portal fantasy stories, it is a girl. And they always end with the girl, like, unfortunately has to go back to like the mundane regular world. And Mara and I were talking about long before we decided to write this how we hate that trope. We were like, it's so dumb because like it, you know, like this girl gets to this place and it's like, you know, Alice in Wonderland, she has that whole entry, if I had a world of my own, and she just describes what she would want it to be, and she gets there and then like at the end has to come back, and Dorothy has to come back, and in Narnia they have to come back, and Wendy has to come back. It's like, that's dumb. And then like in Coraline, like she wants another world so badly, and then the world she gets is horrifying. And she's like, what the hell is this? And it's like they try to paint it as if like that world, you know, Labyrinth was another one we talk about where like Labyrinth's ending really doesn't make any sense, especially because that movie was kind of made for an older audience and was like this teenage girl feels so alone and isolated and like no one understands her, and then she finds this place with like all these people who like believe in her and give her purpose. And like, yes, it's very dark, and you know, David Bowie's character is very morally gray, but it's like you want a world that's very complex like that and isn't just like working by the rules of our reality. And you know, we were like, why aren't there stories where girls get to go this place and stay there? And if anyone's read the Wayward Children books by Shauna Maguire, it's about like kids who go to those worlds and then have to come back and how miserable they are about it. And they talk about how girls come back more. And there's a line where they said, we notice the silence of men, we depend upon the silence of women. And so in most portal fantasies, especially when children's portal fantasies were getting invented, it was during the Victorian era, a time when women were really repressed. And so you'd have these stories where young girls would get to go somewhere else that had like radical acceptance, and they got to like be important and lead adventures. And then in the end, they have to come back. And so that's why like 99% of the like characters in our book are women. And there it was the idea of like Mara says, this is a door that we're giving the reader, and it's like you go through and you make sense in this place and you don't need to leave. You like there's nothing to make you have to go back. And so when we were thinking of what inspires us, it was in a lot of ways like we want to rewrite the ending. We want to change it so that you can stay. Like we wanted to, and if we aren't changing the endings, we want to look at it from another character's point of view. So like the poem, The Owl King, which is my favorite, and is one of the ones that took me the longest to write, is the Labyrinth inspired poem. And I was like, well, we always talk about how devastated we think he looks in the end of Labyrinth when she leaves. And we were like, I said, I want to do this from his point of view. And I want to figure out what he was feeling when she left, because he was so convinced she would want to stay. And the same thing with the poem Yesterdays is from the Mad Hatter's point of view in Alice in Wonderland, specifically the Tim Burton version, where he's clearly in love with her and wants her to stay, and she doesn't. And it's like, why would you choose to leave this world that makes so much sense? And so those are like, you know, there's this balance, I feel, of melancholy poems of like the characters in the forest who thought they found someone who wanted to stay and didn't. And then the idea of like you, the reader, are a character who wants to stay and you can.
I love all of that. I think that's so cool just to like that, like you watched all these and you're just like, this was a terrible decision. Stay in the magical land because it's the best part of it. And then just like, I loved how Mar like talked about the entrance to that. I love all these answers. Y'all are doing great.
Yeah. Yeah. We said we have a door on the cover, and this drawing is inspired by a character from The Starless Sea, Mirabelle. And so for the cover, Mar was like, what do you want? And I said, well, we need a girl on the cover because poetry books just be having girls on the cover. And we were like, we could model it after Mirabelle. And then Mar came up with like, what if she's holding a door? Like she's controlling it. And so I was like, yes, 100, that's what we're doing. That's 110% it.
So for this book and the illustrations, were there any like deleted ones that didn't make the final cut, or did everything make it in, or like is there like, yeah, sorry.
As for the drawings, yeah, like I made some drafts. It's not like very like, it was very like early on in the process. I made various drafts. I was like because also like I didn't know what the vibe for the drawings was going to be exactly, so I made like more dark drafts of like a woman with a cage around her head or stuff like that.
There was that woman. There was like a woman in the stars with like long dark hair, and we debated, does this fit? And we were like, no, it doesn't. And then for the poems, it wasn't necessarily so much as that I had, because I knew very specifically what I wanted in my poems, but I rewrote a few of them many times because I would write it and be like, that is not it. The first one, Into the Woods, is like literally the last one I finished because I wrote it so many times because it was like, this is not, because I had such a specific idea and was like, I know I can get to it. It just would take me longer. Like some poems I would sit down and I'd be like, that's it. Like I'm finished. I'd be like, knocked this out, hit this out of the park on the first go. And then other ones I'd be like, oh my God. And it would take me so long, or I'd do like a lot of research to get it right. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily that we had like, like when you write a novel and they're like, you have to cut this many words, or sometimes if you read like a rough draft of a book, like characters get consolidated down. It wasn't quite like that because it's not prose. So it wasn't like we were cutting out plot points or characters. It was kind of like we had a lot of drafts of things until we figured it out, though, since we had never done this before. Like now we have like, we get what we're doing. But it was kind of like, Mar would always like kind of lead us in the discussion of what do we want the person to feel when they look at this, which was not a way that I thought about things. And that was very helpful. Not just be like, whatever, right? What you the idea of like, well, we're making this from the points of view of fictional people and not ourselves. So what do we want the reader to feel about these characters?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As for like what the reader will feel, like I always wanted to add texture and stuff like that to the drawings and like elements that will fit more into the narrative, right? Like teapots and stuff like that, and the teacups as well that run through like some of the poems, or the mushrooms. So like it can not just feel like certain scenes, but like you're going through the forest and you're like interacting with these like objects and items.
Yeah. And you have like you described, Mar, some of the drawings like are like tarot cards because of how tarot cards are referenced in the Starless Sea.
Yeah, like there's this scene in the Starless Sea that Mirabelle is looking at a tarot deck that someone gave to her, and she's just explaining how like it will tell a story, but like she has been like rearranging them and she doesn't know what it says, and like just like another type of voice is like, if they rearranged these cards it will tell them the whole truth. And I think that I wanted to do that like with some of the characters, like the ones from Caravan of Lies. I always thought like, okay, Isabella is the high priestess, and I see Beth more like the empress and stuff like that, and like Saren was more of like between like a hermit and like temperance. And I will see like, and I was like, okay, when we were trying to like build up an idea for the Neil Gaiman clone, which was at first like a joke, I was like,
yeah,
no, like
she can just joke.
Yeah.
We were trying to I feel like so many things Mara and I do. We're like, wouldn't it be funny? And we're kidding. And then we do like literally like so much stuff. We do literally like the name of our theater troupe. We were like, wouldn't it be funny if we called it and then we did. And so like we read Antony and Cleopatra the other day, and I was like, wouldn't it be funny if we all wore sheets? And then I was like, everyone wears sheets. We're doing it. I was like, everyone commit. We need to wear like the most tropey version of ancient Egypt. So
yeah,
we were trying to, because we still like, this was the first time we did it. We were trying to figure out like, we honestly were like thinking it would be a struggle to get it to be so long. And then at the end, because like you're making poems and drawings like independent, you're not like writing a book. You're not writing a novel. We would be like, oh, do we have enough? And then when we like put it all together, we were like, wow, we have a lot. But we wanted like a few more things. And I was like, we need one more. We literally needed like one or two more vibes. And we were like, okay, what are things we both like that would fit this vibe? And then as a joke, I was like, just Neil Gaiman, just the idea of him, because he's our favorite author. And we literally just all the time, we'll just start talking about him. We'll be like, you know, who's a genius? Neil Gaiman. And we'll just be like, when he did this in this book and he did that. And when he said this, like, and so I said that as a joke, and Mara was like, yeah, right, like we can't do that. And then later Mark sent me a voice memo. She was like, I was actually thinking. Like I left the call and was like my shower, and I get out of the shower and Mark sends me like 3 voice notes about how we could put Neil Gaiman in the book. And I was like, love it. And so that the Neil Gaiman piece in total took a while. And again, like Mark said, it was a joke. We weren't going to do it. And then we were like, you know what? We also have 2 poems that are referencing The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And that was another one as a joke. I was like, I said as a joke, what if we did this? And I was like, JK, that's a dark academia. We can't put that in there. And then later I was like, well, you know how they like to do this and to do this? Well, if we just focus on when they're in the woods. And Mara was like, love it, let's go. And so those were a lot. There was several pieces where I think Caravan of Lies, I joked about that too, but I was like, oh, that's a web series that like almost no one's watched. Like,
yeah, you were like, how like specific can we get? How just dark?
There was a discussion where I'd be like, that's too niche, and Mara was like, who cares? And I was like, good point. And so we did, like, I think the most niche poem is Wise Words from the Women in the Bothan, because I wrote it from the point of view of these 3 characters in this web series I wrote, talking to the reader, referencing fictional characters from other books we included. And when I was writing it, I said to Mara, I was like, this is the idea I'm having, but like, is that dumb? And she was like, no, do it. And then she was like, what picture should I include for the Starless Sea? And I was like, all of them, just throw it all in there. And then like it made very much this idea of like, Mara said, like, you're telling a story by how the cards are arranged. And so it was kind of like, since those poems and pictures come so early in the book, it's like we are, you know, here's the story that you might experience depending on how you go through this forest kind of idea.
Yeah, and just like the lore of tarot cards is that it tells you the story of like a hero, you know, starts like a fool and meets these different people or different characters, and it grows, right, and understands part of its life and whatever. So it started as as a concept for tarot, and it's just interesting to develop it and change it. And like I love collecting tarot decks because they're so different. Like people pick whatever they want, like artists do whatever they want with them, and it's just, I don't know, I think they're lovely pieces, and each one of them are so unique. It doesn't matter that they are the same cards with the same meaning. Like you find different elements and different stuff like that, and I hope that some of the illustrations gave that away. Like you can find clues or stuff like that.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, Molly, we're going to say something to add on to that.
Yeah, for sure. I was just agreeing.
I love that you guys are talking about like, oh, this was a joke, and then it turned into this great idea, because all the best like, oh, that's not gonna work, turns into like some of the best ideas ever, like 100%. So, what was the process of you guys publishing it? Like, how did it feel to like click send and be like, oh my gosh, like this is all our work, and then like have it out in the world for people to enjoy?
Stressful as hell, because we learned the hard way that we don't know how to format shit. So we, our friend Michelle, very talented writer, Michelle D. Ring, who works as an editor and everything, she has published books for herself on Amazon and for other writers. She's been hired to do that. So she was like, yeah, I'll help you guys format it. But also she had only formatted novels. So we are in here with this fully illustrated book, like not tiny little picture, like full on illustrations, and the poetry, which is weirdly formatted compared to prose. So she's like, oh, I'll like give you guys some notes. And we get in a Zoom call. And I think the first thing she asked us is if we had picked a trim length. And we were like, well, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. We were like, we just spent an hour and a half putting it in a Word document. Like that's as far as we've gotten here. And that was too much work onto itself. And so we tried for like 4 or 5 hours to do it ourselves. It was not working. We kept uploading things and Amazon was like, that's not right. And so we asked Michelle to help, and Michelle was like, just send it to me. Just send me the Word document. I'll do it. But then like we had like forgotten to put 2 things in it, and then there was a typo, and then like they sent us a proof of it, and we were like, looks good. We just asked Michelle to make like these few edits for us, and then Amazon was like, no, actually now it's not the right dimensions. And like Amazon was like, the cover's not the right dimension.
Yeah. Finally, or this blank page, please fix it. I was like, there's nothing there. What do you want me to do?
So finally, Michelle, thank God, did it for us. We sent her like several gifts because she was like, you guys don't need. We were like, no, we do, because this wasn't working. But yeah, I was literally like, we kept checking to see when we would be notified that it was live. And literally I was like waiting for therapy to start. And I got the notification. I was like, your book's now up. And that was crazy. And then when we got like our physical copies to hold and just checking the reports and seeing like numbers come in, like you've sold this many copies and like the ebook has been downloaded this many times. And then like some people on like Instagram and TikTok would like, you know, tag me to show me that they'd gotten the book. And like one girl like made a whole little like unboxing on TikTok, which was the weirdest thing. It was just really surreal to do that. So yeah, it was the technical aspects. We're not doing that again. We're just paying Michelle next time. We already had that discussion. We were like, this was not, we were like, we could figure this out. How hard could this be? And too hard was
hubris really got us.
It'll be fine. What do? We just upload a Word document? What could happen? And we just upload a picture of the cover? Like, no, it did not work. Michelle also works as a graphic designer, so like she knew what she was doing and we did not. And so yeah, but when we actually like, it still like didn't feel like it was actually gonna happen. Like we kept promoting it. We're like, here's advanced praise from people we had read it early, and it didn't feel real until like when Mara got her physical copy, she like sent me pictures and stuff and was like, it's here, this is crazy. So the technical stuff was like stressful as hell. But then once it was like Mara, wasn't it? Like once we had it, it was crazy.
Yeah, like just seeing it in person, like I still couldn't like conceptualize it. Like I would hear my friends tell their families like, Mara has a book coming out or whatever. I was like, no, that's not true. That's not real.
It was so weird the first time that when someone, like I reconnected with someone I went to college with and I hadn't talked to him in years, and he was like, so what do you do now for work? And it was like the first time that I could say author instead of just writer. I was like, I actually just had a book come out. No big deal. And it was like, that's something I've wanted my entire life, is to be able to say author and not writer. I went to school for writing. Like I've been trying to get a book published for so long. And yeah, that was like, my mom took me and my sister out to like brunch, and like she saw like someone she worked with, and she was like, we're here for Molly's book release. And I was like, why would you say that? That sounds like a lie. Like it didn't, like it was so weird. And like Mar went out to celebrate it and was like sending me pictures, and one of them was just like Mar laughing, like reading it in a cafe. And I was like, how is that a real photo? How is someone holding this thing that we were like working on late at night on like Zoom? It was a very surreal feeling. It was crazy.
That sounds like amazing. I just like, I can feel like the happiness. It's so cool. I love it. So you guys said that you're gonna do another one? Is that like kind of like the idea? Like, can you tell us a little more about that, or is it like under wraps?
We can tell you. Oh, we don't care. So the next one, Mara and I have two very specific aesthetics. One is like this witchy cottagecore thing. The other one is intense, depressing gothic fiction. So we're just going hard turn into the other aesthetic. And so we're already like, it's gonna have like, we made our list of vibes again, and but this time we like had a very good grasp on what we were doing. And so we were like Crimson Peak, Frankenstein, Beetlejuice, like Jane Eyre. We got more specific. Mar was like the old gods. I was like this one lyric in The Unwanted Animal, like this lyric in this Taylor Swift song, this myth, the Beauty and the Beast, like kind of stuff like that. And the idea of like, this is a forest, the other one's going to be kind of like in this, if anyone's, the way I was like thinking of describing it, if anyone's read the original Beauty and the Beast, like the novel by Madame de Villeneuve, it's this huge gothic castle, like mansion type thing. And when Beauty walks around during the day, there's like all these doors in it that lead to kind of different worlds. So like within the house. And so it's kind of like one of the big things about gothic fiction is that the house feels like a character. So that's kind of like what we're trying to work on for the next one. And we're planning to release it close to Halloween. Yeah. There's no title yet or anything. We've like just started, but it's gonna be longer than this one. Oh, someone in the chat said, "Okay, but which Taylor Swift?" The one from The Last Great American Dynasty, where it's
oh yes,
where they say she was seen on occasion pacing the rock, staring out at the midnight sea. That was and then the 50 years is a long time holiday house sat quietly on that hill, free of women with madness and men in bad habits, and then it was bought by me. Like that idea. That's what we were going for.
I love that. Oh, that looks so good. I would love to see the aesthetic with that.
That bridge is like one of my favorite bridges she ever wrote. Is that whole thing, that like free of women with madness and men in bad habits. Like I love that. Mar, what do you say about our new book?
Yeah, like we're just leaning into like the more dark aspect of it, of like our interests and all of that, and I don't know, like just as much as this was like a door to our enchanted place, I think this one is just going to be like visiting and you being the gothic like leading lady.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is like we're turning the reader into a gothic leading lady. It's kind of like, what would you do? Because whenever Mar and I talk about gothic stories, like we rewatched Crimson Peak the other day, and I was like, I would not be making these choices. If I did that, I'd be like, no, what? Like I'd be calling somebody. I was like, I wouldn't put the key back. What is she now? She just gave it away. That she was like,
yeah,
it was. We talk about Jane Eyre. We're always like, yeah, that was an interesting choice she made here. And like, I just remember like when we watched, like I showed Mar Beetlejuice the musical on a totally legal recording that I have. And that's like my everything. And in like one scene in the second act, like Beetlejuice wants to like keep hanging out with Lydia, and she's like, I have to like go do this thing upstairs. I got to try and like contact my mom because her mom's dead. And she goes upstairs, and Beetlejuice is like, what am I supposed to do? Can you believe that? She left me again. And Mar was like, just go upstairs. And so like Mar and I would constantly talk about, we're like, yeah, like what I was like, yeah, if I was in this story, I would not act the way Lydia's acting. And so it's kind of, again, the idea of like, we wouldn't leave the enchanted place. It's like, well, if we were the gothic leading lady, how would we act? And then if you are the gothic leading lady, you know, what do you do?
Yeah, also,
like gothic fiction relies on like the woman being kind of clueless. I mean, like, oh my, who could have seen this coming? And everybody saw it coming. Bella from Twilight, like everyone knew. You're the only one who was not piecing this together.
Yeah, and like also, I don't know, like I want to see space just as like part of your body as well, or the reader or the creator, like all these items as well to be just part of you. Like the house is a body on itself, but like what is your house like? What is your like body like, and how does it react and stuff like that? And yeah, like just showing off, like obviously there's all the good stuff, but there's also like the things that we try to repress, like the objection of it. So
yeah, gothic fiction is a lot of like repressed emotions that society kind of deems as especially too much for women to have, kind of like all get released in this dark place. And it's kind of like you are able to like lean into darker desires. So that's like, you know, Jane Eyre or Twilight, or like old vampire stories like Carmilla. And it's the idea of like seeing the corruption of innocence not as a bad thing, and like this is a kind of emotion that's been happening since the beginning of time. And that's why Mar really wanted to make sure we leaned into like the idea of like the ancient Celtic gods, whereas like we were kind of referencing like Greek gods in this, which is a more like newer digestible version of God. You like ancient Greek gods are actually like not the most ancient pantheon that there is. And just like the idea of like leaning into darkness, not in like, not to get like real cliche, but like how in Edgar Allan Poe poems, it's very much the idea of like, just, you know, like I stare deep into that darkness, dreaming long. I stood there wondering, dreaming dreams no one dared to dream before. The idea of like being the thing that can survive in the darkness, you know. So this is a thing where it's like you go to this like lighter, whimsical place, and yes, there's like intense, somewhat scary things, but it's still like where you're meant to be, and anyone can go there and be accepted there. But then if you go into like a gothic setting, it's like that's a place for a very specific type of person, and are you that person or not? And I think you can tell if someone reads Jane Eyre and is like, why would she pick Rochester? He's insane. I'm like, okay, it's not for you then.
Yeah, and like I was thinking of this lyrics of Florence and the Machine that is like, my heart is like a haunted house. There's things in there that scratch about. They make their music in the night, and in the day they give me such a fright. It's just yeah, like I want to like lean into that for making the illustrations and all of that. It's just
yeah, and like I'm obsessed with the song "The Unwanted Animal" by The Amazing Devil, and she says like, "You make shipwrecks out of my dress," and then she's just there's a line where she says, "You make me want to," and then she whispers, "Throw the blade at the wall," and it's just like this dark, like it's always been like Gothic fiction has like a history of like women getting to finally like unleash darker emotions without judgment and without punishment. So like the idea of like this being like women can decide to go and leave this world and find a magical, more accepting one. Gothic fiction, we want to lean into the idea of like women getting to unleash a kind of darkness that they don't. It's always a real like we don't like reality kind of thing for us. So.
That's not for us, no.
I don't accept that energy.
I mean, yeah, I mean, like writing like kind of these fantasy and like Gothic kind of things is kind of like reality can suck it. We have the magical and the haunted house and stuff like that. Like, rather be there.
I think it's just the romantic period really got to us. We either want to go to the cottage and ride by the lake, or we want to just create a monster. So
I think like a few days before the book release, I tweeted, "Every day I wake up mad that I don't live in a cottage in the woods with Mar." Like one time Mar just sent me a link to like cottages that were on sale in Edinburgh. It was like, "Let's go." And I was like, "Yeah, let me check my bank account real quick." I didn't even like own a passport at that point in time. And Mar went, "Let's go." And then another day I was like, "Did you guys know that you can like live in a castle in like Styria if you like?"
Yeah.
And then like Amar just like sent back a gif of like someone packing a suitcase. Like every time like Mar and I like go somewhere like on a walk or in a park, we'll be like desperately trying to like I went to the cemetery a lot last summer to write, and I was like, "There's this basket on like the outskirts of the woods," and Mar was like, "Something's going on there." And I was like, "Right," like, and everyone else in our friend group's always like, "Okay, guys." Like when we did one of our movie readings was of Labyrinth, and Mar played Sarah and I played Jareth. And our Michelle was like, "Yeah, I was getting kind of nervous." I was like, "Wow, we got to really take this seriously because those two are just obsessed with this." And we were like full costumes, props, everyone else was kind of like, "Wow, they're really committing to this." And we were like, "Go big or go home." And so it was very fun to write this book, and then like with someone who just has identical interests and like really gets what I'm thinking, because like there will be like some books and some movies and stuff, you know, that like you have like different people you can relate different types of stories to, but Mara's definitely the only person where there's very few stories that we don't like agree on. Like I can only think of maybe like 2 or 3 off the top of my head. Most of the time we're like, "Yep, that's it, that's like," and we'll be reading a book and we'll like the other day Mara was like, "I'm looking for a Highland romance," and I was like, "I'll read one with you. Let's go." Yeah. And then we're just like on Google trying to find one. We're like, "Oh, that's it. Let's go. Let's get it read." Like 24/7. I was like, "You read Phantom of the Opera?" She was like, "No." I was like, "You should read. You would love it." And I was like, "I'll read it again with you." And she's like, "Cool." Like last summer, we just reread a bunch of books we had never read. We were like, "You read this? Let's do it again. Have you read that? One more time. Let's go."
Like a great partnership and friendship, just to show that it's lovely. It's so great to see that. And then people are just jealous of your imagination.
It was definitely like I've collaborated with other friends before, and it's not like those were bad experiences by any means. It's just there's always like a level of compromise because you're just 2 very different people coming at the project with different mindsets. And Mara and I aren't like that. I think us both having ADHD also helps because we hyperfixate so much that like when we decided we've made up a magical forest, then it was just like the constant in our minds. Like we were like, "Okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going." Like,
yeah. So I've seen like a few questions in the chat, but like the most recent one I think is like a cool one. So I'm going to steal it. Thank you, person. So commenter Jay says, like, what was the timeline of writing and creating this book? Did you have deadlines in mind? Were there any setbacks? And so how did you overcome them?
Yeah, we had we picked June. We started in April, and we picked June 20th because it was the summer solstice. So we thought that would be good. And yeah, the only real setback is we couldn't figure out how to format the goddamn thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just because we didn't take breaks. Like once we decided to do it, we were doing it. And even if we weren't having meetings with each other every night, we were like constantly working on it. And like,
yeah, like Molly will constantly like send me stuff or upload stuff in the like Google Doc that we shared and stuff like that, and I will read it, or I will like just like, hey, what do you think about this one or this drawing or this color or stuff like that. Yeah, we didn't stop, which was also insane because at one point we had a meeting and was like, oh, we have all of this, like
20 we started going through it because like you're making poems and drawings like singular from each other, and we were just putting them in the same document. It's like in a Google folder. We weren't like putting this because we weren't writing it in order. Yeah, that when we like sat down and was like, we have like 30 poems and 30 that we were like, wait, what? Yeah. And it wasn't just like we were writing it and drawing it, but we were like reading books. Like we started reading House of Hollow during the process of this, and we're rewatching movies and talking about stuff during this. And it was like we were always like, once we chose to be like, yeah, we rewatched Alice in Wonderland, and then we literally was such an agenda. We're like, okay, time to do the Alice in Wonderland movie reading, and like we're just constantly talking about it. And so yeah, it was. Someone said we had our own folklore moment. We really did. That's what happened. There were many nights where we were both wearing our folklore sweater too. It's too hot here for me to be doing it, but yeah, it was very exciting. There was times where we would like be in a call with other people and be like, well, we're gonna go do this now, and so like time to just check out from the world. And it was one of those times where it just made sense to just get really moved. So yeah. We didn't stop with Marcia. We just kept doing
it. So before we end, do you guys have anything to promote before we end? Like,
well, you can buy the book now.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, you can buy the book now on Amazon. Our theater troupe, Theater But Better, is doing a live reading this Saturday of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone at 9 p.m. EST on my channel, Magical Molly. And our book club, the Bard Book Club, that reads and performs Shakespeare every month. We have a Discord now that people can join. The links are on the Bard Book Club. And then you can follow me on all social platforms at Magical Molly. And then Mars, our Instagram is Mars Cottage of Dreams, and her regular one is Mar Cabri.
Yeah, I have commissions open if anyone's interested.
Beautiful. So for sure, check them out. And yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Before we go?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so I'll just read everyone the intro poem and show you the picture Mar has. Here, Mar, you want to hold up the picture like we did last time?
Yeah.
Okay, so the intro poem is called Into the Woods, and that's the drawing, and it's gorgeous. And it starts with a quote by Rumi that says, the poet Rumi, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. The sun is sinking in the sky. A staircase is winding towards a beautiful unknown. Is this where you get lost? Do you remember those bygone days of witches and hobgoblins and stories you learned to deem false? Are your eyes weak from the sun on Sundays, kneeling before gods you stopped believing in long ago? There are altars there. Did you know that once the world was one giant forest? Woods covered this earth from coast to coast, a never-ending nightmare of beautiful darkness. No one had hylophobia because no one knew how to fear the only home they'd ever known. You can follow the milky white rabbit deep into the stories you wish you hadn't grown out of, like an old sweater you dug out from under the bed. There's a wildness in you that churches gnash their teeth at, wishing they could tame. Wine should be drunk for more than holy reasons. Are you coming? This is only the beginning. You know, they say if you find a staircase in the woods, you should never climb it." And that's from Not a Minute, which is on sale now. So,
yes.
Yeah, thank you, Julia, for hosting the final stop on our tour on your channel.
Thank you for coming and talking. It was awesome. So once again, It's multiple times the charm. Not a Myth is on Kindle and physical copy on Amazon. It looks gorgeous physically. I'm gonna go buy my own copy like right after this.
Also, yeah, it's free on Kindle Unlimited, and we're gonna have book plates soon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're working. It's again, Mara and I don't know how to format anything. It was also a struggle because like I'm not in the same country. I was like trying to sign with the computer. It took me like 8 tries. But we do have a limited available for people in America who it'll be signed by me. We have 20 limited available signed copies for people in the US. If you DM me on Instagram at Magical Molly, so you get them directly from me and not from Amazon. But for everybody else, it's on Amazon, and it's like $4 or $3 or $4 on Kindle. But if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's completely free. And if you read it, if you would leave us a review on Goodreads or Amazon, it really helps. And anyone who has it, we love when people tweet at us or tag us in the pictures of the book. And just thanks to everyone for coming and reading the book and everything.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.